Finish what you start. The book is narrated by Prabhakar's audiobook. Chapter number 6. No Distraction Zone. This is a chapter that promises to kick your butt. It's full of powerful techniques to ensure that you jump into action. Without further ado, let's jump into it. Minimizing distractions. We often think that distractions can be our friend when it comes to self-discipline. If willpower is finite, then we reason that it's better to take a break, refresh, and distract ourselves from urges and temptations. Baba Shiv, a professor of marketing at Stanford Graduate School of Business, conducted a study that illustrated how distraction affects us. Shiv distracted one group of participants by asking them to remember a phone number, and then asked all the study participants to choose either chocolate cake or fruit. Those who were trying to remember phone number choose the cake 50% more often than those who weren't. The conclusion here is that focus is an essential part of being disciplined. If you are constantly distracted, you succumb to temptation without even giving yourself a chance to exercise your willpower. It just doesn't occur to you, and you use the path of least resistance despite your best intentions. Distractions sneakily eat away at our self-discipline. This process can go on in the background so that we don't even realize that our discipline is lapsing until it's too late and all of our past efforts have been wasted. The design of checkout lanes in supermarket is a prime example of capitalizing on distracted minds and depleted willpower. You can make healthy decisions every step of the way through the grocery store, but you can't escape without one final distraction of candy, chocolate, and snack at the register. This is frequently the most difficult time to be disciplined because you are so close to exiting and thinking ahead, and the items are cheap and available to purchase instantly. What should you do with this knowledge? If you work in a cluttered environment, clean it up. A clean desk can help create a clear mind, and a clear mind is much more able to remain disciplined. A Cornell University study provides some compelling evidence supporting the concept of out of sight, out of mind as a means of improving discipline, and it applies to far more beyond your desk. The study participants were given a jar full of Hershey's Kisses that was either clear or opaque and either placed on their desk or 6 feet away. On average, the participant ate 7.7 kisses per day from the clear jar on their desk as opposed to 4.6 per day from opaque jar in the same location. When the jar were placed 6 feet away, the participant ate 5.6 kisses per day from the clear jar and 3.1 per day from the opaque jars. Surprisingly, the study subject consistently reported feeling that they had eaten more kisses when the jars were placed 6 feet away, even though the opposite was true. That discrepancy is a crucial piece of information because it provides a simple guideline for improving discipline. That is, you can use laziness to your advantage by clearing your workspace of distractions. You may not completely forget about those distractions, but the more effort it takes for you to give it to a temptation, the less likely you are to do so. Furthermore, it eliminates some of the most counterproductive discipline lapses, the mindless ones that we don't even realize we are doing. It's so much easier to reach our hand into a cookie jar without thinking about it, if that jar is easily accessible and visible. Those are the types of scenario that you want to avoid when designing an environment for discipline. If you place the cookie jar in a distant cabinet, you don't eliminate the temptation altogether, but you make it so that giving in to the temptation requires a lot of effort. That makes a big difference. Ultimately, you want to create an environment for yourself that is clear of distraction and obvious temptations. You can make discipline drastically easier just by eliminating the mindless and effortless lapses in discipline that are made possible by an environment that hasn't been optimized. This applies to your desk, your workspace, your office, what you can see from your desk, and even your computer desktop. Keep them clear of distractions as much as possible, and you will simply forget about them. In your lapses of discipline or boredom, you will have no other option than to keep working. Default to positive actions and behaviors. Optimizing your environment for self-discipline really comes down to understanding how automatic most of your decision making is. To illustrate that point, consider the finding of a study conducted in 11 European countries on organ donors. The data showed that countries that automatically have citizens opting in to being organ donors requires action to opt out had rate at or above 95% participation. When the default choice was not to be an organ donor, however, the highest rate found in any of the 11 countries was a mere 27% participation. Ultimately, people just went with the option that required the least effort. It said nothing about their actual intention or desire to be an organ donor. This same concept of defaulting to the more desirable choice can be applied to your own self-discipline. We are lazy and will happily accept whatever is in front of our faces. You can make it easy for yourself to choose whichever options most benefit you, while also making it as difficult as possible to make harmful decisions. A default option is one that the decision maker chooses if he or she does nothing or with a minimal amount of effort. In other contexts, default options also include those that are normative or suggested. Countless experiments and observational studies have shown that making an option the default will increase the likelihood of it being chosen, which is known as the default effect. Making decisions require energy, so we often choose the default option to conserve energy and avoid making decisions, especially when we aren't familiar what it is we are making a decision about. Optimizing this default decision is where the bulk of your effort to make a more disciplined, conducive environment can take place. You might believe that you control the majority of your choice, but in reality, that isn't the case. Instead, a significant amount of your actions are just responses to your environment. If you are distracted by social media, for example, you might move the app icon to the back page of your phone so that you aren't constantly seeing them whenever you open your phone to do something else. Better yet, you can log out of the app after each use or delete them from your phone altogether so that you will only use them when you really want to instead of letting them be distractions. And if you are in a habit of mindlessly picking up your phone while working, you can simply start facing it down and far enough away that you have to get up to reach it. If you want to practice violin more, put it on your desk with your music note open. If you want to floss your teeth more, keep floss in your backpack, in your bathroom, on your nightstand, and on your sofa. There is a seemingly endless number of examples of how you can utilize the default effect to become more disciplined with very little use of willpower itself. Another one is that leaving potato chips and cookies out on the kitchen counter will make it your default choice to eat those things whenever you walk to the kitchen feeling even slightest bit hungry. Hiding those or not buying them at all and replacing those unhealthy snacks with fruit will instantly increase the probability that you eat fruit and that you avoid the unhealthy snacks. Want to exercise more? Put a pull-up bar in your bathroom doorway. If you keep sugary sodas and juices in your refrigerator, you are making it your default choice to drink them whenever you are thirsty and open the fridge. But if you don't have those options, you increase the likelihood that you will drink water or making tea. Want to take more vitamins? Put them right next to your toothbrush for easier access. If you sit in an office all day and have back problem, then you might benefit from standing and walking frequently throughout the day. You can make this your default option by drinking water constantly so that you are forced to get up to go to the bathroom. Or perhaps you could schedule an alarm on your phone and place it somewhere out of reach so that you have to stand up to turn off the alarm whenever it goes off. The whole point of this is that you can save your willpower and your energy by making positive changes to your environment. The two biggest facets of environment change are reducing clutter and distraction and optimizing choices based on the default effect. If you reduce distraction from your environment, you will clear your mind, which in turn increase focus, efficiency and productivity. Furthermore, you can use your dopamine reward system to your advantage by reinforcing your own good habits, while also cutting back on mindless pursuits of small pleasures. Finally, you can make it so the path with the least effort leads to the choices you desired and benefit from. These all make it so you can sidestep actually using discipline and to save it for your bigger daily challenges. After all, why exercise willpower when you don't need to if you can plan around it? Attention residue. Sometimes focusing on work can be difficult and you find yourself wondering just why it's so hard to stay on track and ignore shiny objects. Luckily, there is an explanation for this. In 2009, Sophie Leroy published a paper that was aptly titled "Why is it so hard to do my work?" In it, she explained an effect that she called attention residue. Leroy noted that other researchers had studied the effect of multitasking on performance, but that in the modern work environment, once you reached a high enough level, it was more common to find people working on different projects sequentially. Going from one meeting to the next, starting to work on one project and soon after having to transition to another is just part of life in organization. Leroy explains. This is essentially the modern version of multitasking. Working on a project in short bursts and switching between them, not necessarily doing them all at once. People may not actually be working multiple tasks at the same time, but it's nearly as bad to keep switching between them in relatively quick succession. For all intent and purposes, this is multitasking. The problem identified by this research is that you cannot switch seamlessly between tasks without a delay of sorts. When you switch from task A to task B, your attention doesn't immediately follow. A residue of your attention remains stuck thinking about original task. This becomes worse and the residue becomes especially thick if your work on task A was unbounded and of low intensity because before you switched. But even if you finish task A before moving on, your attention remains divided for a while. Leroy test forced people to switch between different tasks in a laboratory setting. In one of these experiments, she started the subject working on set of word puzzles. In one of the trials, she would interrupt their work and force them to move on to a new and challenging task. For example, reading resume and making hypothetical hiring decisions. In other trials, she let the subject finish the puzzle before giving them the next task. While the participants were switching between puzzling and hiring, Leroy would play a quick lexical decision game. This was so she could quantify the amount of leftover residue from the first task. The results were clear. People experiencing attention residue after switching tasks are likely to demonstrate poor performance on that next task. And the more intense the residue, the worse the performance. This doesn't seem too far for a stretch when you think about it. We have all experienced that frantic moment when we are doing too many things at once and suddenly find ourselves unable to do any at all. However, how can you concentrate on any task if you keep switching back and forth between two or more different things? You will likely be stuck simply trying to make sense of everything and organize it so you can understand it. It will only force you to waste time trying to catch up to where you were instead of pushing forward. You will take one step forward but two steps back each time you try. Even worse news is presented by Stanford researcher Clifford Nass, who examined the work pattern of people who multitask. The researchers split their subject into two groups, those who regularly do a lot of media multitasking and those who don't. In one experiment, the group were shown set of two red rectangles alone or surrounded by two, four and or six blue rectangles. Each configuration was flashed twice and the participant had to determine whether the two red rectangle in the second frame differed from the first. It sounds simple enough. Just ignore the blue rectangle and see if the red ones change. In fact, it was quite simple, and those who didn't often multitask had no trouble doing this. However, the high multitasker performed terribly as they were constantly distracted by the irrelevant blue images. Because they couldn't ignore the images, researchers thought that maybe they were better at storing and organizing information. Maybe they had better memories. But this was proven wrong by the second test. After being shown sequences of alphabetical letters, the high multitasker also struggled to remember when a letter was making a repeat appearance. And again, the low multitasker performed better overall. It was as simple as that. The low multitasker did great. The high multitasker were doing worse and worse. And worse the further they went along because they kept seeing more letters and had difficulty keeping them sorted in their brains. Multitasking is seen to be the best of both worlds. But when you are in a situation where there are multiple sources of information coming from the external world or emerging from memory, you cannot filter out what is irrelevant to your current goal. This failure to filter means that you are slowed down by irrelevant information and will struggle to complete a task without distraction. It is much easier to focus on one thing at once without letting distraction interfere than to try doing several things at a time and overload your brain with too much information. From both of these experiments, it's clear that multitasking isn't really good for anything, and all attempt to do it don't really lead anywhere. By multitasking, you are neither able to adequately focus on each new task nor able to ignore any distraction that are hindering your work. There might be certain ways you can multitask 1% more effectively, but the overall lesson is just to avoid it whenever possible. Single tasking. What does that mean? To set everything else aside and not check, monitor, email, or even touch anything other than the current task you are working on it. It requires singular focus and the purposeful and intentional turning out of everything else. Switch off your notification and ditch your phone. If you must be on your computer, keep only one browser tab or program open at a time. A lot of single tasking is about consciously avoiding distraction that seems small and harmless. The biggest culprit, your electronic device. Ignore them when possible. Keep a spotless workspace so your eyes don't catch something that needs cleaning or adjusting. Ideally, single tasking reduces your environment to a blank room because you shouldn't pay attention to any of it. Attempt to pay attention to when you are being interrupted or subtly switching between tasks. This is hard to catch at first and will require you to make conscious decision against your instinct. Something that will be very hard to resist is to tell yourself that you must act on something immediately and interrupt your task. This is rarely the truth. To combat this urge, set aside a post-it to take notes for ideas that will inevitably spring to mind regarding other tasks. Just jot them down quickly and return to your primary goal. You can address them after your single tasking period is over and you won't have forgotten anything. It will keep your mind focused on one single task while setting you up for future success. Batching. Henry Ford, founder of Ford Motor Company, got a lot of things right about cars. He had a few competitors back in the day, but the primary reason those names are essentially lost in time is because he was also the creator of the factory assembly line. On a factory assembly line, workers focus on one task at a time. This streamlines the progress and makes it far more efficient than having a single worker see a project through from start to finish, switching between multiple tasks. It allows workers to specialize and perfect their task, which cut down on errors and make troubleshooting far easier. Workers didn't have to do more thinking than was necessary for the task at hand. For Ford, this made his automobile production efficiency and output shoot through the roof and dominate his market. That, in essence, is what batching can do for you. Batching is when you group similar tasks together to complete them all at once. Ford assembly line was essentially 100% batching because his workers only performed one task incredibly efficiently. Let's take a common example we can all relate to: checking emails. If you have any sort of online presence or job, you probably have a steady stream of email trickling into your inbox every hour. Constantly checking your email is an extremely inefficient use of time. It interrupts other tasks and scatters your focus whenever you receive a new email. Many of us drop what we are doing to take care of something from an email. Then we have to start the original task over again because our flow and momentum has been interrupted. Batching email will considerably improve your productivity. An example of this would be to only check your emails at the top of every 2 hours and purposely ignore or block your inbox notification. At first it might be difficult, but limiting how often you check email in this way allows you to focus on your task without constantly being distracted and having to re-acclimatize yourself. Perhaps more importantly, it teaches the lesson that saying no to some tasks is just as important as saying yes to the correct ones. Batching teaches the art of purposeful, deliberate ignorance so you can focus on other tasks. Switching from task to task is a large mental burden because you are essentially stopping and starting from zero to numerous times throughout the day. It takes a lot of energy to switching from task to task, and there are usually a few wasted minutes just regaining your bearing and figuring out the status of the task you were working on. Of course, these kind of interruptions only lead to achieving just a portion of what you can and want to. In the example of checking email, batching allows you to stay in a mindset of reading and composing email with all its associated skills, tasks and reminders. Email is a distinctly different mindset and way of thinking than designing a new graphic for an advertising campaign. Staying in the same mindset pay huge dividends. Batching allows you to save your mental energy for the task themselves and not waste your energy on the process of switching back and forth between them. What else can you batch? You can schedule all your meetings in one afternoon, so you will have a free time, free uninterrupted morning to work. You can plan to do everything that require computer access in the morning and even batch parts of tasks such as the part that require you to make phone calls. You can also batch your distractions. This isn't to distract and amuse yourself more efficiently. It's to make sure that you are conserving your energy and allowing your focus time to be exactly that focused. How can you batch distractions? For example, if you are burned out on a particular task, you might want to take a little social media break. By all means, take it. However, allot just a bit more time to check all of your accounts. ESPN, Refinery 29 and whatever other distractions you occupy yourself with. Grab a new cup of coffee, take a brisk walk around the office and say hello to your neighbor. Get it all out of your system so that when you are back to the work, you can have a solid and fixed block of time in which to focus. After all, if there is nothing new on your Facebook pages, you will probably feel less compelled to check it. Once you knock yourself out doing all these distraction activities within the allotted time, you can switch to productive work for the rest of your hour. The more you divide your attention among different activities, the less productive you will be. However, if you begin doing something similar to the previous activity, you will find it's much easier to get going because your mind is already geared toward doing a certain kind of task. Do all the similar tasks together, one after the other, and then move on to the next batch of similar or related activities. Effective batching can skyrocket your productivity no matter the context. Don't do list. Everyone knows the value of the to-do list, no doubt. You have stumbled across tips elsewhere about using a to-do list to increase productivity. But everyone inherently kind of knows what they should be doing and when they need to do it by. The act of writing it down just helps remind them and making people more likely to take care of their obligations. However, not everyone knows that what they shouldn't be doing, what they should be avoiding, common ways of procrastinating, and distractions that masquerade as priorities. Along with your to-do list, it's equally important to make a don't-do list. Each day, we are faced with choosing tasks that will create the biggest impact on us. And these are many hidden obstacles. Again, we all know the obvious evils to avoid when trying to upgrade the productivity. Social media, goofing around on the internet, watching the Bachelorette while trying to work, and learning to play the flute while reading. It can be difficult to distinguish between real tasks and useless tasks, and it will require some hard thought on your part. You need to fill your don't do list with tasks that will sneakily steal your time and undermine your goals. These are tasks that are insignificant or a poor use of your time, tasks that doesn't help your bottom line, and tasks that have a serious case of diminishing return the more you work on them. If you continuously devote and waste your time on these tasks, your real priorities and goals will be left untouched. Here is what you should put on your don't do list. First, include tasks that are priorities but which you can't do anything about at present because of external circumstances. These are tasks that are important in one or many other ways but are waiting for feedback from others or for underlying tasks to be completed first. Put these on your don't do list because there is literally nothing you can do about them. Don't spend your mental energy thinking about them. They will still be there when you hear back from those other people. Just note that you are waiting to hear back from someone else and note the date on which you need to follow up if you haven't heard back. Then push these out of your mind because they are on someone else's to-do list, not yours. You can also temporarily pushing things off your plate by clarifying and asking questions from other people. This puts the ball in their court to act, and you can take that time to catch up on other matters. Second, include tasks that don't add value as far as your projects are concerned. There are many small items that don't add to your bottom line, and often these are trivial things. Busy work. You can delegate these, assign them to someone else, or even outsource them. Do they really require your time? In other words, are they worth your time? And will anyone but you notice the difference if you delegate the task to someone else? By taking on the task yourself, you are getting stuck in the weeds of perfectionism. You should spend your time on big tasks that move entire project forward and not myopic, trivial tasks. Often these are useless tasks disguised as important ones, such as selecting the paint color for the bike shed in the parking lot of the nuclear power plant you are building. Third, include tasks that are current and ongoing but will not benefit from additional work or attention paid to them. These tasks suffer from diminishing returns. These tasks are just a waste of energy because while they can still stand to improve, and is there anything that can't, the amount of likely improvement will either not make a difference in the overall outcome or success, or will take a disproportionate amount of time and effort without making a significant dent. For all intents and purposes, these tasks should be considered done. Don't waste your time on them, and don't fall into the trap of considering them a priority. Once you finish everything else on your plate, you can then evaluate how much time you want to devote to polishing something If the task is at 90% of the quality you need it to be, it's time to look around at what else needs your attention to bring it from 0 to 90%. In other words, it's far more helpful to have 3 tasks completed at 80% quality versus 1 task at 100% quality. When you consciously avoid the item on your don't-do list, you keep yourself focused and streamlined. You don't waste energy or time, and your daily output will increase dramatically. Why read a menu with food items that are unavailable? It's pointless and waste your mental bandwidth. By preventing your energy level from being dissipated by those things that suck up your time and attention, a don't-do list enables you to focus on what matters. This can have a dramatic and positive impact on your daily routine. The fewer things that tug on your mind, the better. The kind of stress and anxiety they create only hampers or kills productivity. A don't-do list will free your mind from the burden of having too many things in the air because it eliminates most of these things. You can focus on the balls that are still in flight and steadily knocking each one out. The 40-70 rule. Many of us are reluctant to take actions outside the comfort zone unless we have all the pertinent information we need. But can you actually have too much information to start something new? Former US Secretary of State Colin Powell has a rule of thumb about making decision and coming to a point of action. He says that anytime you face a hand choice, you should have no less than 40% and no more than 70% of the information you need to make that decision. In that range, you have enough information to make an informed choice, but not too much intelligence that you lose your resolve and simply stay abreast of the situation. If you have less than 40% of information you need, you are essentially shooting from the hip. You don't know quite enough to move forward and will probably make a lot of mistakes. Conversely, if you chase down more data until you get more than 70% of what you need, you could get overwhelmed and uncertain. The opportunity may have passed you by and someone else may have beaten you by starting already. But in that sweet spot between 40% and 70%, you have enough to go on and let your intuitive guide your decision. In the context of Colin Powell, this is where effective leaders are made. The one who have instinct that point in the right direction are who will lead their organization to success. For our purpose of breaking out of the comfort zone, we can replace the word information with other motivators. 40 to 70% of experience, 40 to 70% reading or learning, 40 to 70% confidence, or 40 to 70% of planning. While we are completing the task, we will also be doing analyzing and planning on the fly. So this range of certainty helps us tend towards action. When you try to achieve more than 70% information or confidence or experience, etc., your lack of speed can result in many negative consequences. It can also destroy your momentum or stem your interest, effectively meaning nothing going to happen. There is a high likelihood of gaining nothing further from surpassing this threshold. For example, let's say you are opening up a cocktail bar, which involves buying a lot of different types of liquor. You can't expect to have absolutely all the liquor you will ever need ready when the doors are ready to open. But on the other hand, it doesn't make sense to commence operations without enough for customer to choose from. So you would wait until you have at least 40% of available inventory. You have got the momentum established. You figure if you could get more than half of what you need, you will be in the pretty good shape to open. You might not be able to make absolutely every drink in the bartender's guide, but you will have enough on hand to cover the staple drinks with a couple of variations. If you have around 50 to 60% inventory, you are probably ready. When the remaining inventory arrives, you will already be in action and can just incorporate that new inventory into your offerings. If you waited until you had 70% or more inventory, you could find yourself stuck in neutral for longer than you wanted to be. This way of thinking leads to more action than not. Waiting until you have 40% of what you need to make a move isn't a sedentary state inside your comfort zone. You are actively planning what you need to do to get out, which is just fine. Making the execution before you are 100% or even halfway ready to do so is the kind of gutsy move that shakes you out of the indifference of your comfort zone in a hurry. Do nothing. Burnout is a very real risk, especially in today's modern age where to get ahead. It seems that everyone has a full time job as well as a side career that is aimed toward making money. We seek to intentionally pack our days full of activities, professionalism, and social as a means of squeezing the last drop of enjoyment out of our life. Ironically, this quickly becomes counterproductive because very few people have a battery that can function like that. As for what that means for your brain, any shred of fatigue will affect your clarity of thoughts. That part should be clear from our own lives. We function better on 8 hours of sleep versus 3 hours of sleep. However, what's less obvious is that disconnecting from everything and doing nothing at all can actually be a path to greater creativity and insight. There is a reason that when we are zoning out at the gym or in the shower, we seem to have a disproportionate number of epiphanies. Thought is inherently fatiguing and taxing on the mind and is characterized by the brain emitting beta waves. Relaxing and lack of attention, on the other hand, is characterized by the brain emitting alpha waves. What are alpha waves also associated with? Studies by Professor Flavio Froelich, among others, have shown that alpha waves are associated with enhanced memory, creative thinking, and overall increased happiness. Maybe that's the reason meditation and practicing mindfulness is being pushed so hard these days. These intentionally slow you down and put you in a state of releasing alpha waves, which triggers increased happiness and life satisfaction. Most of the world top performers, such as CEOs, always mention meditation as a vital part of their daily routine. This is likely why. The ability to tune things out allows them to function at their peak when it matters, like a battery recharge in the middle of the day. For the high achievers out there, it's not necessarily a matter of taking a break just to generate some alpha waves. Don't think of it as a rest. Think of it as recovering so you can get ready when you need to really think creatively. We instinctively know to sleep, stretch, and warm up our bodies if we have an athletic competition, but we disregard doing the same for our minds. When you relax more and do nothing at all, you enter the state of allowing your mind to wander, and you also come back recharged and refreshed. Allow yourself to daydream, because when was the last time you daydreams were boring and routine versus creative and outlandish? If you need a break, resist the urge to pick up your phone and scroll through your social media. Just starting into blank space might be a better use of your time. Takeaways. Minimize your distraction in your environment. It turns out that out of sight is out of mind with distractions. So don't keep anything stimulating near your workstation, otherwise your willpower will slowly deplete itself. Create default actions wherever possible. This is where the easiest and lowest resistance path for you is the path you want the most. This is also done through curating and designing your environment for productivity. Single tasking is an important concept because it definitively proves the flaws of multitasking. When you switch from task to task, you create attention residue. This means it takes a while for you to adjust to each new task. Even if you were already familiar with it, you can eliminate this by single tasking and also by batching. This is when you do all similar types of tasks together to capitalize on your mental efficiency. A don't-do list can be just as powerful as a to-do list because we are rarely told what to ignore. As a result, these distractions and sneaky time suckers can invade our space without us even knowing we are being duped. Include tasks you can't move forward on, make progress on, or help. The 40-70 rule is when you beat inaction through the amount of information you seek. If you have less than 40%, don't act. But if you have 70%, you must act. You will never have 100%, and chances are 70% is more than sufficient. The rest you learn along the way anyways. Finally, you might want to do something from time to time. This is rest and relaxation. But you should think of it as mental recovery. What does an athlete do between races or matches? You got it. They recover so they are primed to work again when necessary.